Northwest Now is supported, in part, by viewers like you. Thank you.
It's a little morbid, but Washingtonians are near the top when it comes to deaths from recreation, certain dread diseases, skin cancer, and infections. So, is Washington killing you? It's a little disturbing, but that's the question we're asking on this edition of Northwest Now. Once you start noticing a pattern, it's a gift that keeps on giving. We kept noticing media stories about ways Washington led the pack when it came to certain diseases and certain causes of death. People always talk about depression and suicide up here, but we fall in the middle of the pack on those. One thing we do lead in, however, is multiple sclerosis. A Multiple Sclerosis Society study shows that MS is more prevalent here in the Northwest than almost anywhere else on Earth. Multiple sclerosis happens when the body's immune system attacks the central nervous system. As the insulation around the nerves is damaged and scarred, the disability increases. But every patient is different. Some live with relatively mild symptoms that come and go. Others progress right through to complete disability and early deaths. This variety of symptoms and effects makes it really hard to study and understand. And that goes for the big question, too. Why is it so prevalent here?
Fred Burrow was diagnosed with MS at age 24, having attacks, then remission periods, but slowly declining to the point of needing a wheelchair just to get around. But lately, he and his doctor are hard-pressed to notice any major changes. There's just very little rhyme or reason to how this disease progresses.
Well, it's something different all the time. I mean, or maybe not. Maybe you go a couple days or weeks or months or years without any symptoms. And all of a sudden you get something that is totally off base. I mean, and it might be something that knocks you in your butt, or it might be something that is fairly benign. You know, you can get around with it, but you don't know what's going to happen.
That lack of predictability and the difficulty of developing treatments over the decades is the reason Burrow admits he's not holding out much hope for a cure in his lifetime.
Since I was diagnosed when I was 24 and I'm 53 now, I'm not hopeful for myself in particular, but I'm hopeful for everybody else. You know, if there's something that can help me, great, but it's just a wicked thing.
Wicked, yes. But Tacoma Group Health's neurology chief, Dr. Edward Tay, says there is reason for optimism. 3 new drugs just came onto the market, with another 3 or 4 in trials. Those drugs, combined with all the drugs and therapies that can be used to treat MS's secondary symptoms and improve quality of life, mean an MS diagnosis isn't hopeless.
Definitely not. I mean, definitely these days we have a lot more weapons, if you want to say, against fighting the disease. Keep in mind, MS is an immune or autoimmune disease, and what that immune trigger is what we're trying to figure out. So we don't have a cure. So I would say, you know, that's the drawback, but we do have a lot more medicines, especially in the last couple of years, that can fight the disease and keep it at bay.
The thing about beta-seron or any other disease-modifying things is you don't have as many attacks. And for me, when I was relapsing and remitting, that helped keep my attacks were few and far between and less severe. And now I don't have attacks, so to speak. I just have kind of a very slow progression of what's going on. I mean, very slow. Like, I see Dr. Tay about once a year, and he almost can't tell the difference. Neither can I most of the time.
So that brings us to the big question. Why so much MS right here in the otherwise beautiful Pacific Northwest?
So anything above the 40th degree in either direction, northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere, has an increased incidence of MS. And so a lot of theories about why that is. I think that's the controversial debate and what we're trying to figure out. What's really hot in the MS literature right now is the vitamin D theory. So if you look at vitamin D levels and the patients with MS, they tend to be, on the whole, generally a lot lower than the population as a whole.
While the data about the occurrence of MS points to latitude, it still doesn't answer the underlying question about what exactly triggers MS. So, while it's hard to get a laugh out of something as serious as MS, the good news is that it has nothing to do with the state we live in.
Washington is definitely not killing us.
The research also shows that smoking may play a role in increasing a person's risk and speed the progression of the disease. So that's just one more reason to quit or never start smoking. While the risk factors for MS might be a lack of vitamin D, too much sun is to blame for skin cancer. Much to our surprise, the rate of new melanomas, which are responsible for 75% of all skin cancer deaths, was 35% higher here in Washington than the national average, and that's according to research that ended in 2005. Statewide, we're number 6, but a more recent DSHS study says that if the Puget Sound region were a state by itself, it would rank 4th in the nation for skin cancer. And I want to warn you, a few shots in this story are a touch graphic, but skin cancer isn't pretty.
It's another follow-up visit to the dermatologist for Will Shook, a California native who spent a lifetime in the sun, paid dearly for it, and has a message for those not sure about how damaging the sun can be.
Well, look at my face and guess. This part right here is a piece of bone that came out of my arm here. And skin and stuff I had to take off my leg to cover things. And like I say, I got lucky.
That's right. Shook considers himself lucky. Sunbathers probably don't realize that about 175 people in Washington state die of melanoma every year, 7.4% higher than the national average. But while melanoma is a killer, run-of-the-mill basal and squamous cell carcinomas are no picnic either if they're not caught early. Dr. Gail Diamis spends her days examining thin sections of seemingly routine skin lesions, looking to see how deep they go into a patient's skin. Shook's case started out as a minor basal cell case that went undetected for too long.
Even a small little basal cell carcinoma on your skin that looks like a little pimple that doesn't heal, most people will say, I've had this pimple, it's been there for a few weeks, and it's just basically scaling on and off, and it just doesn't want to go away. Those little things is what you see on the skin, but sometimes when you go inside it, there are some of them that become a little bit more aggressive and eat up your skin in such a way that it can be a very deforming kind of skin cancer. So much so that you could actually lose part of your nose, or if it's in very, very specific areas like near the eye or the lip, it could actually result in functional problems. Even to the point, like in this gentleman that we interviewed, is like you could actually lose your eye.
While Dr. Diamis's patients today are all over 60, skin cancer is one of the few cancers whose incidence is increasing in the young. Eventually, millions will end up right here, where former skydiver Joseph Wilson ended up today, having another basal cell carcinoma dug out of his face, wishing he knew then what he knows now when it comes to limiting exposure to the sun and using sunscreen.
I used to think that I was immortal, but the longer you live, the more you realize that you're not. And I would advise everybody, stay out of the sun as much as possible.
Northwesterners are outdoorsy type people. You know, you're out there, you're fishing, you're golfing, you're hiking, and doing all these water sports and things like that. So just being out in the environment, that's going to put you at risk.
And Dr. Diamis says that includes the Northwest cloudy days too, when UV rays cook our skin whether we feel it or not.
How you doing?
Dick Thomas is feeling it today, feeling another chunk of his ear coming off as Dr. Diamis works to make sure she's got enough of the lesion removed to prevent a routine case from becoming a more serious one.
I kind of woke up a little bit, but it was actually too late. Especially having skin cancer. I learned my lesson, definitely. It's definitely scary, no doubt about it.
During our visit, workers in the lab at the Everett Clinic never stopped examining a steady stream of skin cancers, looking first to confirm that it's not a deadly case of melanoma, and then evaluating it to make sure the surgery got it all.
So far so good.
Something we know today can be reduced by the consistent use of sunscreen, UV protectant clothing and hats, and UV safe sunglasses.
People think, oh, playing in the sun it's fun. Now we do have sun protection you can put on. I advise you to use it. We didn't have it when I was young, and this is the results.
The good news is that most skin cancers are not killers or a path to disfigurement. So we asked Dr. Diamis, is Washington killing us?
Oh, I don't know. I think that Washington is doing a good job in terms of protecting its citizens and doing a good job with educational programs such as this. And I don't think Washington is killing us. No, sir, I don't think it is.
And just to make the point again, the problem around here is that we think we don't need sunscreen on cloudy or overcast days. We do. A lot of UV radiation is still making it through. When we do get a nice day, you know what we all like to do, run outside and do lots of physically demanding outdoor activity, whether we're trained up or not. It turns out we're near the top of the heap when it comes to recreational deaths. Mount Rainier ranks close to the top for danger to hikers and climbers. We score high on drownings and all kinds of other recreational-based accidents. And while we're one of the most unchurched states in the Union, a local pastor did his share of praying when he almost died paragliding.
People best know Dennis Cummins as the pastor of Experience Church TV on South Hill. But they probably don't know about his history up here. This is Poo Poo Point, where licensed and trained paragliders launch off Tiger Mountain to soar out over East King County. There are thousands of successful flights out here every year, and on a quiet fall day in October of 2002, it was Cummins who was preparing for the evening's last launch.
I was getting ready, had all my stuff ready to go, and they asked if I'd help launch one of the guys that's a paraplegic. And it takes 4 people to do that, and I've never helped launch him at that point. And so they instructed me what I needed to do, and I held one side of his harness. And so I had half of his weight, and then somebody else had the other side, 2 guys behind with the wing. And we had to take off synchronously together. And as we ran down the slope, we just kept going faster and faster because we could kill him if we didn't do this right. And they got the wing up, and all of a sudden a gust of wind came up, and he went up, and I couldn't get my hand out of the sling in time, and I got pulled up off the mountain hanging underneath it.
As the milliseconds ticked by, Cummins' options only got worse.
You know, it went from such a serene moment to utter panic because you know you can't undo what just happened. And there was only one outcome in my mind at that point, and that's death. I will die. Everybody on the launch was yelling and screaming because they knew that they were going to watch me fall to my death.
Over the years, like with any extreme sport, the numerous smashes and bashes of paragliding don't deter the adventurous up here on Poo Poo Point.
3, 2, 1.
Nick Wilcox has a couple of dozen flights under his belt and, frankly, feels pretty bulletproof.
Why would any sane person jump off this mountain?
For just the moment to be insane. That's all. That's what attracted me. It's flying is the only thing you can do. It makes no sense, but it's so much fun.
How do you justify the risk you take?
I don't really see a whole lot of risk. This is my 22nd flight, and I'm more comfortable up here right now than I would be walking down the street.
But there is risk. You have to acknowledge it.
Absolutely, there is risk, but that's the fun part about it. Get your blood boiling a little bit.
The risk side of it, I'm not so sure that people really have their arms around what they're up against. Sometimes it's less than what their mind's eye speaks, and sometimes it's a hidden minefield of risk that they have no idea exists.
Seattle Paragliding's Mark Chirico is a pioneer of the sport and says that experience and good training are the keys to survival in any extreme sport, but that ultimately, despite the risks, life is just too short to lock yourself in a room.
With all the texting that's going on while people are driving, add to that the drug use, add to that short attention span, you might not get to the party that's a deadly risk unto itself. You haven't even gotten to the paragliding site or the mountain or the rock climbing site. And I have a feeling that there are more deaths than ever now, just given the current state of affairs of driving down the road.
So, Chirico says that while a lot of people underestimate the dangers of things like paragliding, there is no real pattern to the few accidents that do occur every year. As for Dennis Cummins, well, he eventually had to let go of the paraglider he was clinging to.
I hit one of the old growth trees with my head, and it knocked me loose. I couldn't hold on at that point. It didn't black me out, but I couldn't see. It knocked the blood out of my eyes. And so I was still conscious, and I just started pirouetting through the air. And I wasn't hitting branches, I wasn't doing anything, but I fell over 100 feet. And that is a long way because you have a lot of time to think about things. And I guess the one thing that went through my mind is that my boys would really never know who their dad is because they were so young. That was difficult.
But Cummins somehow survived, recovered from a bruised spine, quit paragliding on a promise to his wife, and came out of it with an all-new appreciation for life. So, I had to ask, is Washington killing us?
No, I think it's the decisions that we're making. You know, this is a beautiful state filled with great people. And so I'm just glad to be a part of it. And I've got another day to live as a gift from God.
Our memories of things like that once-in-a-lifetime paragliding experience are the gifts that are hard to part with, but that's one of the tolls Alzheimer's disease takes on a person. It turns out Washington's Alzheimer's death rate is 85% greater than the national average, and it's our third leading cause of death. What's even more troubling is that deaths are up 82% since the year 2000.
As he churns away on his exercise equipment, Bob Welton looks like any other fit 76-year-old. But he's an Alzheimer's patient, diagnosed 5 years ago after his wife noticed he couldn't open the cupboard in a house they lived in for decades. A battery of cognitive exams and a CAT scan confirmed the diagnosis.
I like to assume that, like my father, I'm going to die of Alzheimer's. And that's going to be down the road as far as I can take it, and that's why I try and do all these things, meds, eating healthy, all the things that I'm supposed to be doing. And again, I'm very lucky to have Juanita. I couldn't be luckier to have her with me on this journey.
And it's a journey tens of thousands of Washingtonians are destined to make. There's no real theory about why it's so prevalent here, beyond some notions that perhaps we report and diagnose better than the rest of the country.
We think it's nothing less than a public health epidemic. It's the third leading cause of death in our state. We believe that there are about 500,000 Washingtonians currently affected, either because they're living with Alzheimer's or another dementia, or they're caring for someone with the disease.
And that's a point Bob and his wife Juanita make frequently, that Alzheimer's is rough on caregivers too. Juanita happens to be a mental health professional, which helped in Bob's early diagnosis and promises to help her cope as the disease advances. But even so,
I guess I try not to look too far ahead, and so I immediately quit my job and focused on having good time together while we had good times together. And that's really what we're trying to do, is just to enjoy each other and enjoy the new normal and cope with whatever comes along.
The challenge goes beyond the individual living with the disease to the folks in the family. There's so much stress on caregivers, and you know, the vast majority of people who are caring for those with Alzheimer's or other dementias are unpaid family members and friends and neighbors.
Leroy says Alzheimer's is one of about 70 different forms of dementia, but it's the only one that kills all by itself, as patients lose cognitive function and eventually basic brain functions like swallowing and breathing. It's not a pleasant future, but the Weltons insist that the early diagnosis can really help in getting in on some of the new medications and in doing the necessary planning when it comes to moving and the legal work, and finally, in making the most of the time that remains.
I accepted it and try and deal with it as best I can. I'm very lucky to have Juanita with her mental health background, because she is so aware of cognitive issues and mental health issues and so forth. My family, friends accept me for who I am, and I'm very, very lucky.
But possibly unlucky genetically. Bob's father and his mother died of Alzheimer's, but genetics still doesn't fully explain Alzheimer's prevalence in Washington. So we have to ask, is Washington killing us?
No, the state is not killing us. The disease is killing us. You know, the notion of finding humor in it is terribly important. Some of the things that happen, some of the behaviors, some of the challenges, the spirit of people and families living with disease, I can't tell you how inspiring it is for us to serve a population. Nobody can prepare for this. And the dedication, the persistence, the abiding love, and the abiding humor that we see in the individuals and the families that we serve is inspiring.
Kitsap County, by the way, is #1 in Washington for Alzheimer's. The prevalence of the disease in Washington is one of the reasons the legislature authorized the new Silver Alert system, which is similar to the Amber Alert system, but is designed to help find disoriented Alzheimer's and dementia patients. Finally, infections and vaccinations. Tuberculosis occurs in Washington at almost twice the national rate, and we've made national news for whooping cough and measles outbreaks too. We actually lead the nation when it comes to meningococcal infections, with the death rate at about triple the national average. At the same time, parents in only 5 other states are worse than Washingtonians when it comes to making sure their kids are vaccinated.
Vashon Island is a quiet refuge in the middle of Puget Sound. The Bicycle Tree Landmark is an example of its quirkiness. There's a definite countercultural vibe here and a fair dose of distrust when it comes to government. And that's all well and good until it comes to vaccinations and the island's very high percentage of unprotected kids. This year, as District Nurse Sarah Day arrived to prepare for a new school year, she hoped that this year more kids would come immunized, improving last fall's astounding 25% exemption rate.
Basically, I've just tried to get the word out to our community that we are a cluster that is at risk of vaccine-preventable disease. So not only are we at risk for disease, but I've tried to get across to parents the consequences of not having your child immunized would mean that your child would have to be excluded from school in case of an outbreak. And if we had a measles outbreak on Vashon in our schools, that could be for quite a long time. So, you know, it's not just the disease, it's the practical implications.
As she looks at the records, Nurse Day says so few Vashon kids are vaccinated, the island doesn't have what's called herd immunity, which brings with it the potential for measles or any number of other diseases to really nail Vashon.
No one knows. I mean, you can't say that we will get an outbreak. We are certainly much more highly susceptible to an outbreak of vaccine-preventable disease. When we had our whooping cough epidemic several years ago, you know, it hit the northern counties in Washington State harder than it did the Puget Sound area, but we were, Vashon Island was #1 in the King County area for whooping cough. So that shows you, you know, the effect of not having that herd immunity.
Day says all the media attention has residents too scared to talk about immunizations for fear of being ostracized or attacked by the other side. While she tries to encourage vaccinations with information and publicity, fear runs deep. Day says most of that fear coming straight from the internet, where ignorance and proven science carry the same weight among the uninformed.
It's very easy to read anything you want on the internet. Whether or not it's you know, an actual verifiable piece of information is a whole nother story. And so once parents read this kind of information and become scared, it's really hard to unfrighten families.
Shifting gears now to an infectious bacteria, and most of us living here in Washington don't even know to be scared of meningococcal disease, but we lead the nation. The Tacoma-Pierce County Health Department's Nigel Turner says while case numbers are small, it can be devastating.
Oh, absolutely. This is a very scary condition. You know, if people become symptomatic with the disease, remember this is actually a fairly common bug. You know, 10% of the population can be carrying this at any time. Only a tiny fraction of those people will actually develop disease. But when you do develop disease, it's very serious, and a significant proportion of people will die.
But Turner points out that meningococcal disease can also be prevented with, you guessed it, a vaccine. But why does Washington lead the pack for meningococcal disease? Nobody knows. But we still have to ask the question, is Washington killing us?
No, Washington's not killing us on this one.
And you should know that the death rate from meningococcal infections is about triple the national average here in Washington. So let's wrap this up. Even though we have a high number of serial killers, lead the nation in property crimes, and live in a perpetual traffic emergency with studies calling us some of the worst drivers in the nation, in the end, a state is just a mental construct. So Washington isn't killing you. But we are more susceptible to certain problems for some reason. In this program, we discussed bacterial infections, vaccines, exposure to the sun, and recreational accidents, which are all things you can make decisions to help prevent. MS and Alzheimer's, not so much. Avoiding those may be more a matter of luck or genetics. The bottom line, I hope you make good decisions and have some luck to go along with it. I hope this program got you thinking and talking. To watch this program again or to share it with others, it streams on our website at kbtc.org. And be sure to follow us on Twitter at Northwest Now. Thanks for taking a closer look on this edition of Northwest Now. Until next time, I'm Tom Layson. Thanks for watching.